You've probably already heard of productivity advice like the Eisenhower matrix, GTD, or how multitasking doesn't actually work. But in this video, I want to highlight some productivity practices that I've tested that are really out there, either because they seem so detailed and insignificant that you would have never even thought of it, or because it goes against the grain of what is popularly considered to be a productivity best practice. This is based on my own experience, and it is no guarantee that any of these will work for you. All I hope to achieve with this video is to inspire you to try out something new. The first tip is to use music to your advantage. Music can be a major distraction if it's not used properly, especially in my experience if the music has lyrics. I think it's because when you do cognitively demanding work, in your head there's a narrative going on. Let's try it this way, maybe I should do it that way, etc. There's actual language being used there. If you have a song with lyrics screaming in your ears from your earphones or your speakers, that is likely going to interfere with delivering the best possible work, which is definitely what I've experienced. On the other hand, music without lyrics has enabled me to focus immensely well. One piece of software that offers exactly that and more is called Brain FM. It claims to have science-based playlists to enhance your focus, your concentration, your creativity, or even relaxation. I've tried Brain FM over the past 6 months, and I have to say I'm impressed. If you want to give it a try, you can use the link in the description. They have a 3-day free trial, and I personally recommend using an atmospheric, cinematic kind of playlist to see if it can help you get into a deep work state. They even have functionality for things like the Pomodoro methods. However, I found this a bit too limited since the music just kept on going. The notifier when a Pomodoro session was over was hard to hear, in fact, and you cannot pause or configure it. So I just continue using my own Pomodoro timer. But in terms of concentration music, Brain FM is a permanent part of my tool stack. Somewhat related to this tip, but much weirder, is to shift the pitch of a song you're listening to. This has helped me with creativity specifically. And I think I know why. It's not a scientific thesis or anything, but I remember many years ago on YouTube, it became a trend to upload chipmunk versions of popular songs. Super annoying. You can look it up. They sound awful. However, when I listened to it, I do remember I felt that the song completely changed. It's not just the same song on a different pitch. It felt like something completely new. And that's something that can really help with creativity, because in the end, creativity is all about creating new connections based on something you already know. That is exactly what's happening when you change the pitch of a song. Now, you don't have to do it all chipmunk style and up it by a whole octave. There's a tool that I will link in the description. It's a Chrome extension that can shift it by just 1 or 2 notes, whatever you desire. Give it a try while you're doing creative work and see if it works for you. I know it has for me. I've come up with lots of ideas while brainstorming. This is a super weird but also super effective part of my tool stack. Common advice is to keep a to-do list, to write everything down and make sure that you're on top of your tasks by having a place for them. And I agree, of course, this is great advice. I actually have videos on lots of to-do list apps that you can use. However, I feel what is a bit under-highlighted is that you also need to remove tasks regularly from your list. In practice, you're never going to be able to complete everything on your list. And more importantly, sometimes you're going to be postponing items that on the inside you know you no longer really want or even have to do. And it's exactly those types of tasks that can pose a major risk to your to-do list's health. I recommend declaring to-do list bankruptcy regularly. Whenever you see that your to-do list is starting to become very bloated, whenever you notice yourself skipping that same task over and over for a couple of weeks, you're probably doing it for a reason. Your intuition is pretty smart. Unless, of course, it is a kind of eat that frog task. I have a video on that idea separately as well. If it's a really important thing that you're postponing, but it does need to get done, try to do it first thing in the morning. But if it is something like an article you've saved and you just can't get yourself to start reading it, I know this is what happens for me regularly, it's okay to delete things. Do it consciously, Perhaps do it during a weekly review moment to see, are all my tasks on my list still relevant for me? Do I still need to actually do them? Or am I better off deleting some of them to be left with a to-do list that contains tasks that will actually help me move forward? Another common piece of productivity advice is to break big projects and goals down into small, consumable pieces. And generally speaking, I agree with this because it helps to deter overwhelm or procrastination. However, I've also found that you need to do this mindful. When I started making YouTube videos almost 2 years ago, my very first video was a major undertaking for me. I had never edited a video before, produced one, had to figure out all the microphone settings, etc. All those small details, I made sure to write them all down so that I would always make progress towards finishing the video, which took quite a while. Once I started figuring out which steps were necessary and which steps I could skip, I started turning them into a template, which I also recommend for projects you have to repeat regularly. However, after video number 20, 25 or so, I started noticing that the template was no longer helping me as much. I had made so many videos by now that a lot of these steps I could already do on autopilot. I already knew what to do. And that is exactly the time for you to review your templates and checklists and see whether you can simplify them, whether you still have to break it down as much as you can, or whether you can combine certain steps into one to-do item so that you're not chasing your to-do list to check off items that you've already done, that you already knew you had to do, and instead it actually helps you bring the project to the finish line. The key takeaway here is that you don't have to break things down as much as you can, only as much as you need to. Over the course of my career, I've dabbled in various methods for goal setting, whether it's SMART goals, KPIs, or OKRs. There's lots of frameworks out there for visualizing a certain outcome and working towards it. However, in the end, I didn't really like any of them. In fact, I came to the conclusion that setting goals, for me, is pretty counterproductive. Here's why. Until you reach a goal, you're not where you want to be, right? You're always comparing the present moment to a certain point in time in the future where your outcome will be achieved. And this can put you at risk of no longer appreciating what you already have, or negative self-talk. I know I've been there. I'm constantly comparing my current situation to that ideal situation in the future. The Buddha teaches us desire is the root of all suffering. The second reason is that when you do reach a goal, you'll feel momentarily happy at best. Now, don't get me wrong, they can be intense moments of joy and achievement. I know I've felt them as well during certain milestones in my life. I've also found, however, that I naturally default to the next step. What is the next goal? The grass is always greener. I had to start asking myself, is it really worth it to be unhappy for this long just for that small moment of quote-unquote perfection when you achieve your goal? The third reason is that life is unpredictable in ways good and bad. On the one hand, you can have a stroke of luck that can lead you to achieve your goal way sooner than you ever thought you could. On the other hand, you could experience ruthless misfortune, rendering your goal unattainable or undesirable in the first place. Number 4 is that it conditions you to work towards a reward. In my opinion, it's healthier to make the act itself rewarding. This can help you sustain good habits and just feel more joy in the work you're doing. Instead of chasing a certain outcome, like a big payday, try to find habits that are productive, that do contribute to a positive result, but that are rewarding on their own. Number 5, it can lead you to experience burnout, because a lot of us are facing major goals, perhaps goals that we set ourselves if we're too perfectionistic, or seemingly unattainable goals set by the outside world, certain societal pressures. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's your job. They can lead us to work beyond our limits. What I found to be a good alternative to goals is actually anti-goals, which is where you define a situation that you never want to find yourself in and then reverse engineer yourself away from there by implementing certain habits that help ensure you don't get sucked into that kind of lifestyle, that kind of everyday life that you've defined as undesirable for yourself. As James Clear puts it in his book, Atomic Habits, you don't rise to the level of your goals, but you fall to the level of your systems. This next tip is going to be pretty controversial. I know some of you are going to disagree with this already, and that's okay. But I found that using as few apps as possible, keeping it as close to an all-in-one productivity system as possible, is best for me. And here's why. Number one, it helps reduce clutter because there's literally just one place for everything to land into. And you don't have to memorize what kind of information goes in what kind of app. Perhaps if you have a separate calendar to do project, goals, habits app, it can start to get very diluted and difficult to perhaps find stuff. Number two, it reduces the risk of system collapse, especially if you have multiple apps that you've combined in a sort of third-party way. I know some of you use Zapier to make connections between different pieces of software to kind of have them talk to each other. And this can work very well. However, I've also seen that a certain software update on one end can break the entire chain, and a chain is only as strong as the weakest links. Therefore, I personally try to reduce the number of links. And the third reason I prefer an all-in-one approach is that it improves your ability to zoom in and out. I have my deepest life purpose all the way down to my simplest tasks in the same system, organized hierarchically, and it just really helps me while I do my weekly review, for example, or in other moments of reflection to see how connected is everything that I'm doing. Am I still in alignment with my purpose, with my vision, and all those other things? Having them all in the same system that is easy to navigate between helps me a lot instead of having to find one thing in Asana, another thing in Trello, and perhaps the third in Todoist. And the very last piece of advice I have for you in this video is to actually stop watching as many productivity videos like this one. While they perhaps have a good message to tell, some helpful advice to give, only watching videos on those pieces of advice is not going to help you move forward. Personally, I've fallen into the kind of cycle of hyper-consumption of one productivity video after the other, and I felt so good. I thought I was so busy with self-improvement all the time. But in the end, if you don't take action on any of those pieces of advice, it's more like a mental masturbation rather than actual self-improvement. And I know a lot of you, I've seen it through the analytics that YouTube provides, also watch a lot of these other videos. Now, of course, I'm sure a lot of you do this with intent, that you do it consciously, that you actually implement the advice. But I know I'm not the only one who's also fallen for the trap of clicking on the next productivity video one after the other. So the last piece of advice I'll leave you with is this. Make this the last productivity video you watch. If you found any of the tips that I've shared with you here today helpful, work on implementing one of them. If my content is not helpful to you, feel free to unsubscribe so you can help yourself with not being sucked up into your subscription feed and actually get going. Do you have any weird, quirky productivity tips? Leave them in the comments. And if my videos are helpful to you, of course, then I'll see you in the next video.